Thank you, Zoom lady.
Yeah. Do you have a nice jingle that gets you started on these?
Yeah, she could say something
Yeah.
a little kinder.
I'll
Sound
make that on my
like
to-do list. I'll
felt
come
a
up
little
with a nice jingle.
projection from her voice there.
Yeah.
Why don't they open up with like, "Hey, see you. We are now going to
Yeah.
record. Is that okay?" And you're not going to answer back. You just press okay, right?
Just press, yeah. That sounds way more pleasant. Yeah, submit that.
The Zoom lady.
Yeah, she could say something like, "Let's start the conversation," or
Right?
Ooh, yeah, that sounds so much better.
Yeah.
You could, yeah, submit that.
Create Zoom lady songs like Lunch Lady.
Man, that's a throwback. Adam Sandler's list, his albums. Is that what you're referencing there?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get there. Let's just tease the audience for us being back here for season 2 and do a welcome.
All right,
before
guys.
Before the drums show up and we start doing Zoom lady riffs here.
Yes.
All right, guys. So like James said, we are officially back for season 2. I guess in recording, we've got a few episodes banked that will be officially the start of season 2, but this for us is the start of recording new episodes for this season. And yeah, we're excited to have you guys back. I'm here as always with James, but today we have a special guest.
Yes.
Is it just today?
Well, the first special guest.
So we should call it then a trial. It's like an intern or a tryout.
Yeah. I'm just here to make jokes. He might
make it. Let's be super honest. Yeah. See this guy up here? He might be around. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. So we got Brandon Wilton joining us today. For those of you guys who don't know who Brandon is, he is the founder and CEO of CrossFit South Bend, where I currently work. He's an OPEX coach and OPEX ambassador and chief dick joke maker.
Yeah.
Just all around, just in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing matters. Everything's a joke.
All right. We set the table.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's on.
Set the tone.
Set the tone.
And a good father. We'll ... just to kind of sway the audience back to some.
It's got to be that mix. It's got to be that mix of responsibility and.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Absurdity.
Otherwise, you're just
a
mess of a person. Can't all be absurdity.
Yeah, right.
So I thought today, we're going to be discussing disagreements in fitness today, and Brandon and I have discussed this topic many, many, many times. Lots of interesting questions around it. So I thought it would be interesting for the three of us to, have this conversation together. And Brandon, I don't know if you wanted to say anything by way of introduction or anything like that.
Introduction?
Well,
Hi.
I mean, just.
Yeah, disagreements in fitness. I mean, we've been around for a long enough time to see plenty of disagreements play out in person and through social media, especially since we've had to kind of run along from no social media, and then start to learn this as we go and jump on different platforms as what I would consider almost too old to mess around with it, as I'm swiping through TikTok thinking to myself like, do I have to learn this? Do I have to learn how to use this? Right. So, I think it's interesting, just in general, all of the different ways, not just the arguments that happen, but the different platforms that they happen on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this will be a really good conversation to have, not just around specific topics of disagreement in fitness, but just like how best to go about it. How do we, does any disagreement you have with someone need to be a Zoom call? Does it need to be a podcast? Like, can it be a comment on a social media platform? Should it be an in-person conversation? Just all these questions around like, if you want to have a good faith discussion with someone like we're trying to do obviously today around these things, how best do you go about it? Now, of course, not everything can be a podcast. We can't hop on a conversation with everyone for a podcast. Not everything can be a 30-minute conversation when you disagree. So just having those kind of discussions around how best to go about it and what we should do when it arises, I think are really interesting questions.
Yeah, they're also good things to leave people with, right? Some things they can think about as to how they can manage disagreement in their own head, and how they can manage disagreement of those that are close to them and around them, and then how they can manage what we perceive to be disagreements in the system or in the collective area, and what to do about it. So if we can get people to leave with how to handle those areas, then I think we've done our jobs
Yeah.
as the knights, the noble knights.
The noble knights of fitness. Cough. So since we've got a ton to discuss, I guess I'll start us off just by doing a little bit of a little background on our previous episode on disagreement and fitness, and just some general background on disagreements in general, and then we'll launch into the practical side of things. So last time we were talking about more of the, I guess, general or theoretical issues that arise around disagreement. And, like I typically do, I think it's worth always starting with this like brute fact that we all encounter, which is we disagree all the time with each other about a number of things. There's, kind of maybe silly things or what have you about, sports teams and favorite ice cream flavors and stuff like that. But then there's like deep questions, especially so in the past couple of years, about what counts as moral, the role of government in society, the best religious orientation to take, if any, the best way to live one's life, how to raise kids. And going back to our liberty discussion, I think this is precisely why in a modern democratic pluralistic society where we all have different conceptions of what makes a good life, yet we all need to live together and make things work, having a government where everyone is entitled to the maximum liberty possible, compatible with liberty for others, is going to be the best one, because we aren't going to agree on, the best way to live. I mean, certain communities of people will obviously agree, but not everyone is going to agree on the best way to lead a life. Interesting little philosophical side note. If you guys are ever interested in new philosophy books and just like little concise summaries of them, Notre Dame Philosophical Reviews does really good job of that. And I was reading a review on a recent book where they were talking about political philosophy. And just so people don't think what I just said there is the way, the light, and the truth on the topic, there are other political theorists who argue that no, a society should be a collection of people that have a common purpose, a common good that they're aiming for. And it wouldn't necessarily be, everyone having different conceptions of the good. So just a little side note there in terms of having a different conception of things that, could be a different way of looking at it. That's a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And is that political language?
It's philosophy. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to kind of Aristotelian conceptions and Aquinas and others of like having a common, what's sometimes called telos or purpose. The idea being, before modern political philosophy, which really took as foundational this notion that we're not all going to agree on stuff. Yeah, we got to figure out how to work together. Before that, there were these notions of, well, in a society or community, there's some common good or purpose that's being aimed at that individuals by themselves could not reach without being a member of society. And I feel like this somewhat connects, James, with some stuff you've said before. I mean, the joking version of it is OPEC's North Korea, but the lighter version is something like, a group of people that have a common maybe fitness purpose or something like that, where they have a shared end that they're striving for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just think about the language in there to try to come to just a language starter for my head on the big overarching problem in the end, would be that to today, I think that a lot of people get into the conversation on agreement or disagreement because it really is a power play. It's a play for power on the back end. To your point, philosophically, way back, all things off the table. Yeah, it's to try to come up with these ideas to get to this central central governance, right? This central government that said, okay, we're all agreeing to have disagreements. We're all agreeing to like try to come up with a way to move things forward. And that's why I asked if it was a political tone, because I just immediately my just feelers go off for a power play for individuals to come in and converse on that, which I think will come to our conversation of who are in the quote unquote powerful positions today to make fitness statements, right? And let's all recognize those are power plays. Those are coercive plays. Said a different way, people think those are influencers, but they're not. They're coercers. Because background, they're not looking for a central great way of doing things.
Yeah.
Interesting.
When I comment angrily on your post and then don't go back into communication, I'm not looking to have a conversation about what is best. I'm just looking to discredit you.
Yeah.
I'm looking
to, that's what I'm saying. Like, it could be that.
Yeah.
It could be other things, but yeah, I didn't mean to take it. I didn't mean to take it that direction, Robbie. It was just
no, it's okay.
The thought on the political language of it, right? If politics enters into it, then then we go down the road of like, well, there's great things around civilization and central government, but sometimes that practice of, oh yeah, we're all doing this for the common good, it didn't end up to the common good for a lot of people, because really it was a power play for people, for a few, right?
No, absolutely. And it's absolutely a political notion. And I think that's kind of where modern political theory starts off, as this notion of, yeah, it sounds good in theory to have this greater good or telos at which everyone's aiming, but of course not everyone. Like again, it's just a brute fact of human nature, and unless human nature changes, like, we are going to disagree about things.
Yeah.
And while there are certain shared things we have as Americans, or people in France have as French people, where there's some sort of aim, like at the foundation of any modern pluralistic democratic society, you have to accept that people are going to have different conceptions of the good, and at very deep and fundamental levels about how to raise kids, what's the purpose of life, and yet we still need to practically get on with one another. And so it's definitely a political notion.
Do you believe in immunity? Do you believe in strengthening immunity? Do you believe in having access to and freedom to have as many processed foods as you want, and not believing in immunity that protects you against particular things? Yeah.
Yeah.
Goes down that road, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and
are we disagreeing? Right? Oh, we are disagreeing, because that's a current one today. That's a huge disagreement, not necessarily in our lane of fitness, but it's a big disagreement. And to Robbie's point, the disagreement is in the wrong area. It just, no one wants to have that like public civil discourse of one person up saying, well, this is how you reach the strongest immunity, right? Which is a shot. And then you have other ones like, no, this is how you reach the strongest immunity. It's the purest, let's call it purest humanist naturalist version of the sun and the moon, BLGs, et cetera, right? But there's no room for that. There's no room for that disagreement based upon it.
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of getting the master class in that right now. That's where that last part of the phrase, liberty, maximum liberty possible, compatible with liberty for everyone else. That's exactly where it comes in. What constitutes harm to others? To take just an example that we've discussed and everyone's familiar with, drunk driving.
Yeah.
That represents, in a lot of ways, very strong evidence for potential harm and lots of evidence for actual harm, and therefore we make laws restricting it. But precisely the issue there is, like, what constitutes harm? What constitutes self-harm? Like we were talking about with seatbelts, right? It's a good idea to wear a seatbelt. That doesn't mean it's the right thing for a government to legislate that people should wear seatbelts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously for kids, of course, but if you choose to take your life in your own hands and you're not harming anyone else, why should there be, fines or laws regulating that? So precisely the issue comes at, we are willing to make laws restricting the behavior of others, but only in such cases where the burden of proof is met such that the way someone is engaging in an activity is restricting the liberty for others. That's the tricky part.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, it's a massively complex, tricky part, because in order to find measures of it for, the areas that we lie, which would be, concepts of self-harm somehow coming from sugar, ultra processed food, and cognitive development for a young person through current social media, right? How do you draw the line between that and self-harm, right? And then how do you draw the line between that and quite possibly ... 1,000 iterations over causing harm to others? It's like, it's a really, and because it's so easy to use the seatbelt or et cetera, it's so easy to use those, but it's really hard, to your point, super complex to try to draw the, anyways, this is what we're all talking about right now, is like, you could see how disagreements have to have like a base support, right? A base support understanding. Number one, what are we talking about? What are we actually talking about? What's the language of it? What is the actual thing that we're discussing? And then, how are we going to communicate that? How do we get to a communication? How do we get to a spot where we could like have all hands on deck for input and ideas and, et cetera. And I think that's where you come up with these, what you just said. It's really complex. Yeah. But we can't turn our back on the fact that there are, and there used to be, institutions and places for people to get together and to have these hard conversations. Right? It used to be, but it's not. It's not anymore. So let's not, just shed tears and pour one out for that lost institution. Let's come up with ways to strengthen coaches' brains to get inside those hard ones and figure out how they can do it for themselves,
Yeah. How to navigate around disagreement when it comes up. Definitely.
Yeah. And I think, your expertise on the language of that and background in the philosophical notions of it will get people at least started in it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with that, I've talked many times about like what philosophy is, different conceptions of that, and connected it to different topics that we've discussed, one conception being assumption questioning, one way of viewing it is asking the deepest questions about certain topics, another conception of it being how things hang together in the broadest sense of the term. But in relation to what we're discussing today, it wouldn't be terribly far off the mark to describe philosophy as intellectual combat in a lot of ways, and working through a series of disagreements. And unlike shouting matches, which often tend to occur in our society today, like one of the things I've found very useful about philosophy is it's very much, there's a reason why logic is taught in philosophy departments. It's because if you're going to have these discussions, you need to put something up on the board, like this premise, that conclusion. Does it logically follow? If not, okay, we're debating the truth of that premise, like as opposed to just shouting matches where you're disagreeing with each other, but you're not making much headway on anything. With philosophy, you can actually lay out, okay, what are the things that this person believes? What are the implicit assumptions? What are the premises? What are the conclusions? And how do we move from there? How do we actually make progress with these things?
Yeah. Don't you see, before you go, Brandon, don't you think this is like a massive parallel to fitness? Like, what you just said there, right? You can't philosophize over this concept, like a disagreement in fitness, for 1 minute. You can't do it in 90 minutes. You know what I mean? You can't, but what do people want? People want the 2-minute workout, right? That's what fitness wants, right? So where you're like, no, this is an 80-year plan. What? You know what I'm saying? Like, well, and I'm not lying. It is. The whole thing is an expression, right? It's an expression of the love for that, learning how to navigate and learning how to do these things more effectively, right? And so, yeah, it's challenging to try to figure out how to get through that. But I just wanted to make note of it. It's parallel. The problem is parallel to the current fitness acceptance and landscape. It's like people want the answer, quote unquote, people want to agree right away, right? We want to find an agreement, or we want to show off and virtue signal disagreement right away. There's no patience, right? It's not, I don't want to spend $1,000 to fly to Vancouver to listen to Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris talk for 2 nights. I don't want to do that, right? I want to just read an article on someone berating one or the other, and I'm done. That's it. That's my agreement on belief and purpose in life. That's where you go, right?
Articles are long form now. You're ready to write an article now?
Yeah. Well, that's a conversation for another time. I have my own personal view on that. It's just rewiring back the whole blogosphere, which got people into trouble, which was that you just created your own little bubble of talking to the only people that would pay for your information. So that's essentially where Substack and all these groups are going now. Virtue signaling, oh, it's going to take a long conversation to get to the answer. Oh, that's true. But ... paywall, you got to pay to get in and listen to the exact same shit we'll just talk to one another about. So, you know what I'm saying? Is there really a disagreement in there? No, it's all agreement on your particular concept. So I guess I don't want to go down that road because it's my own shit, but that's even tough to come up with a way to do it, you know. And I want to fall back on, you know, maybe you guys could, you know, help me out with that. What's the historical reference of debate in fitness? You know, whenever has there been, like, you know, did Jack LaLanne ever get up on stage against someone and be like, this is what I think, right? Why didn't that happen? Oh, because things weren't super important for where fitness, you know. Oh, well, most people are getting over fat and we got a lot more things to consume. Do you think it's time someone should get up on stage and, you know, and have that conversation? Sorry, I'm rambling, but there's no, you know, maybe I just want to make this as nihilist as possible. Be like, this is absurd for us to talk about disagreement in fitness. It's never going to occur. No one's ever going to want to do it. Sorry.
Unless you match the current practices with philosophical conversation. You talked about philosophical combat, Robbie. I can see it right now. There's an app where James challenges me to philosophical combat, and then we meet on a Zoom platform where there are moderators and judges. And now this gets live streamed, right? So like matching us up, and now that's the only way you do battle. That's known, that now you're in philosophical combat, and you got to and there's no disagreements that you just throw down the gauntlet in the comment section.
Yeah, it also makes me think about my daughters learning only from me in my home about how they handle internal strife, internal disagreements, right? There's not a lot of opportunity for young people today to learn how to actually be criticized or debate or like be authentic and say, this is what I think, and to actually softly have someone come back and go, I don't necessarily think that way. I'm listening to you, but I don't think that way. Do you know what I mean? Our entire system is set up, you know, and not, it's a very generalized statement, but it's just to cajole and helicopter them. It's like, oh, keep going, you're doing well, you know, but I tripped up. Oh, no, you didn't trip up. You didn't trip up. You're still moving forward. You see what I'm saying? It's like, so that takes, I just thought about it right away as you mentioned that, for the opportunity for, you know, I'm not sure if you guys have a background in that, but the individuals that I listen to that really, you know, hit home uncomfortable points for me that I disagree with are ones that generally have a really good debate background. They come to a conversation with all ways of going about it. Like they have I call it 17 different tools to come at you around different ways to think about the topic that you really believe is true, right? And they hit you 16 times. You're like, oh my gosh, like that's so painful to hear. So it's not only their tools of debating, but it's like their way of going about changing, you know, your concepts and your ideas, right? Which is a disagreement, right? I disagree with your whole notion. And then they come 16 times at me and I'm like, I don't know where to go now, right? So how do we learn this? Where does this come from? Did you guys have an opportunity to get in debate class? It certainly wasn't available for me in my upbringing.
My sister was, which was a lot of fun growing up. My sister got a full ride scholarship on debate, and that's all she did for a really long time. So it was really interesting to hear her kind of go back and forth and debate, and she was good at it. And I was not, so it made childhood interesting. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my mom was a lawyer, and I mean, I did mock trial as a kid and thought about being a lawyer at one point, and then obviously when I entered philosophy, that was kind of where you learn the ins and outs of how best to go about it and the rules of the game. And I think going back to like a metaphor I used like a couple episodes ago, this notion of like when you step into like just take a sports example, you know, an MMA fighter or an NBA player, like when you step into a certain arena, there are certain rules around how you are to engage. You don't get to just like you know, in the MMA fight before they've started the round, you don't get to just go up and like, you know, choke the guy out or punch him in the face. In an NBA game, you're not allowed to just punch someone in the face or throw the ball, you know, in the crowd or something like that. So there are certain rules of engagement. Actually, have you guys ever heard on, have you ever seen on YouTube, there's a guy named The Professor. He's like
Yes.
he's like a white dude who, yeah.
Street ball. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So this was like I know it seems kind of far-fetched, but it actually seemed like a decent relation to what we're discussing today, which is, you know, so he's an amazing ball handler. Wait. Yeah.
When I get the drums, I'll just have it ready.
Getting that up for you,
Locked up.
But yeah, I mean, he's got these, you know, these hecklers who are there at the court and they're saying, well, you know, oh man, this guy can't do anything. And he just, of course he destroys them. But you know, they score points on him and they get one over and he misses sometimes. But the point of all this is that there are like rules to how they engage, right? Like the heckler doesn't get to come up and just like run with the ball. He has to dribble it, and he has to, you know, even the professor has to engage by certain rules. He can't like punch the guy in the face. So it's a similar thing with intellectual combat or disagreement. Like if you want to have anything productive go on, and not just be screaming at each other, we need to come at it from like premise conclusion format. Can I write up your premises on the board? Can I see that they follow valid modes of, you know, either deduction or inference? Am I allowed to question the truth of those premises? All those different things, like there need to be set rules of engagement, and I need to be able to volley something over the net and you need to be able to volley back. And if you can't volley back, then James, like you were saying, with these people who come at you 17 different ways, then you need to either maybe withhold belief with what you're believing, or maybe, you know, decide not to believe something.
Yeah, that's why that's why I love physical expression, right? Because physical expression in the physical universe, you push systems to such extremes that truths are revealed. In the cognitive world, to your point, you have to have rules of the game, right? And in this current technological setting in the cognitive world, I mean, I could give you 13 or 14 different examples where that's all fine and dandy, but the rules suck. The rules suck shit, to be completely honest. I'll give you a most recent one, and I won't go into the story of it, but just research Peter Boghossian and his, I don't know if it was firing or resigning from Portland University. Just go do your research on that, right? And you'll see that the rules of the game were in place. You know, everyone kind of agreed upon it. But when it comes down to the cultural perspective, that swims harder and much stronger than these like truths in terms of how you behave yourself. What is heterodox thinking? What is critical? You know, what is the thought process on it? And you don't need for me to go into what the ideas were. I'm just saying that in the cognitive speech world, it's very cloudy, to your point, Robbie, of like, what are the rules of the game as to how we're going to do this? There's some professions where it's clearly oriented and it's actually quite admirable. There's a lot of academic institutions that have that in place, right? So Robbie, I'm just gonna make an assumption, but you're like, oh, I proposed this idea. I want to dig into this particular topic. You have mentors who are going to be like, yeah, you're full of shit when you're saying that. You know, they say something back and then you're like, okay, I'll change my tone. And then you present it. Then you get to this peer reviewed group, 5 people who are like, oh, I think this about your thoughts. You know, what are you going to do now? So now you got to do this back and forth, and you all come to a agreement based upon what you're saying there, right? But in other institutions and in fitness and other areas, there's no rules of the game. My whole point being, they're in the physical world. That's why we love it. That's why we got to be cautious of, you know, being so inspired of the physical thing, but not, not forgetting that when that physical thing is stressed really hard, these truths are revealed. And I love the way you gave the professor example there, because inside of that is physical expression, right? To your point, you can come up and like do what you want. We're all under these rules though. And now he dekes them out and just makes a fool of them, right? But just imagine in a text Twitter conversation forum, try to create rules around that. It's exhausting to think about how you create rules to keep people like in place, in the same place.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no there's no officiating. I mean, you speak of like when you're in sports, there's officiating, there's somebody enforcing the rules, and this isn't taught. There's no, when you get into this sport, the rules are taught, and there's a person there that's going to, to do it, or everyone else knows the rules, but this isn't taught. No one knows the rules of engagement. The person that just created the profile to comment on your fitness and philosophy post has anonymity and an audience, and now they just want to do that. They don't know the rules of engagement.
Yeah. And therefore, so Robbie, so there are officials with the professor, and you just said it, Brandon, right? The official is the well-accepted rules of the game, right? It's well accepted, right? And the 80 people on their phones watching that are also in on the rules. That's the thing, right? So even like I've seen some of the videos, someone tries to do the person going against them tries to do quote unquote some cheating, right? With like hard fouls or whatever. And everyone's like, so they're all in agreement. That's like, no, that's not allowed inside of these rules of the game. You've decided to step up against this person and you have to abide by those. But I'm just now taking steps towards fitness, right? Just think about it. How in the world in fitness do we ever get to that point where there's well-accepted, concepts of what that disagreement looks like? To me, it just looks, it's continuously more pessimistic in my brain to think about, us not creating like a real better conviction as to what the truths are in fitness beyond our own brains and beyond those that are really close to us. Outside of that, I just don't see a lot of positivity for our point really on communication. What is communication? How is it done? How do we even get to the room where these conversations can occur, right? Outside of this podcast or outside of the concept.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some truth in that. And I, Brandon, I get what you're saying about like having someone who officiates absolutely makes a difference, and having people being aware of kind of the rules of the game. I do think there's a distinction to be made though, between there being rules of the game and people recognizing those rules of the game, right? So this is mm-hmm. like when people regularly say, I'm sure you've run into this, like, eggs didn't used to be healthy, but now they are. No. Eggs have always been healthy. What changed was people thought about whether eggs were healthy or not. Similarly, there are valid arguments and there are invalid arguments. That's just a matter of logic. Like if P then Q, P therefore Q. That is a valid argument form, period. Whether people recognize it or utilize it or engage with it, that is a valid argument form. We can investigate the truth of different premises. So, when you talk about James in like an academic context, you're absolutely right that there are certain times when people can, either due to mob mentality or what have you, certain political factions getting a hold and trying to oust someone that they don't like. That certainly is a feature of academia and other institutions, and certainly fitness. But that does not in any way, shape, or form negate the fact that there are valid modes of inference and deduction. If I look at someone's argument and put it up on the board and put it in premise conclusion form, I can either say that it's not a valid argument, meaning it doesn't have a form that leads to its conclusion, or I can investigate the truth of its premises. Those are just the rules of the game. And that's not something that we just like, we made up. Like, no, that's just the fact of the matter. So there is a way to push back. That's how intellectual discussions proceed, and whether that's recognized or not, that's a sociological matter, right? That's whether certain people tossed him out because they were angry or wanted to oust someone, but that there are rules of the game when it comes to intellectual discussions. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. And I agree that the latter does exist, but I'm just saying in the current cognitive revolution, it's getting less and less. And I'm seeing more and more signs of that. That's just how I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because, quote unquote, and I could use numerous other ones, as I said, they look like rules exist, right? But in the end, it doesn't work out. And so what do you do? And right, it's hard because these people have to be so brave that actually now, depending upon who listens to who, they look like, crazy people, right? And you come and that's why I put down, as you were mentioning, Robbie, like the context of the disagreement really matters. Like, what are we talking about? What is the actual disagreement? And I think, I don't want it to land only on this, but or maybe we could lay out some things that we could say, oh, let's just pick them out of the ear and say, what's really an important area to discuss and disagree on. And then what is actually, we're just calling disagreement, but we're only doing it because it's like a waste of time. This is because, oh, look at me, I'm disagreeing, and people don't see that they do that all the time, right? And they're like, oh, disagreement. And it's like, but what are you disagreeing on? I'm not sure. I just want to disagree. But when it comes down to a particular topic, right? Creation, evolution, right? It's like, okay, now it's I don't know. Do you guys want to offer some other ones that is like some clear disagreeing ideas that probably have some oomph to them? You know what I'm saying? And then let's talk about like what, I guess I'm creating value on what's reasonable to argue over, that you're actually going to get anywhere with, that makes sense to most people. That, I would say things like origin, meaning, morality, faith. Those would be 4 really heavy ones that would be awesome to disagree on, right? Robbie, you and I have done that back and forth numerous ways indirectly, right? Especially on the morality or meaning concept, right? I don't know.
I've got a couple ideas, but B, you got any that you can think of off the top of your head?
As far as like large topic oppositions.
Yeah, just the big buckets that we just want to throw up on the wall. That's like, I think most would like agree that that's some great conversation, of disagreement in there. And then what I was trying to come up with is this ordering sequence of stuff that's, to most people is super lower order disagreements that are occurring, right? Like, well, I don't want to propose any lower order ones. I don't want to make anyone mad, but how about vegetable oils versus naturally derived oils? And sorry, I went off on that one. No one got me on that.
Yeah, fitness specific or otherwise, right? Like Republican, Democrat, there's
politics, right? Political views.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Socialist society versus more, the more extreme forms would be libertarian on one end, and then more heavily socially concentrated on the other.
So I just wanted to mention that because it then does make, and I'm not only doing it for the purpose that all those things below it are like, listen, they're a waste of time. No one really cares about your disagreement. I'm just saying, like, it does matter, right? Even outside the room of the disagreements, it does matter what you're actually talking about. What is the context of it?
Yeah.
Of huge importance.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So a couple other things about disagreement in general, and then I want to kind of launch into, how we best go about dealing with this on a practical level. So in the previous episode, we talked about a number of theoretical issues surrounding the very notion of different disagreement. So like, you might wonder philosophically, why is this even a topic of conversation, right? Like, so many disagreements don't warrant any philosophical reflection, right? There's, someone who's uneducated about a topic and then someone who's educated. Like, that doesn't warrant really much philosophical reflection. But when you have people who are equally knowledgeable, rational, and exposed to the same evidence, who then disagree, 2 major minds in physics or biology or philosophy. How do we account for that? How do we make sense of that? Chocolate versus vanilla, Yankees versus Mets, hip hop versus rock. Like, we joke with people about those being like, okay, well, this is the right one. But in reality, no one really thinks that there's anything of significance there. But when it comes to objective matters of fact, like whether vaccine is effective or not, and even if it is effective, whether it should be mandated or not, whether evolution is true or creation is true or some combination of the two, whether we should have laws regarding others' behavior. Here, we can't just say, like, you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe, right? There are certain things where we can say that, and there are certain things where, as a matter of practical fact, we just can't. And
Or there's maybe certain times where we can say that. Is that what you mean? There are certain times under certain contexts where we can say that. That must be true.
Let me make a distinction.
Depends on the context, right? It depends
Let me
upon
make a distinction between what you might say, like what you might need to say in polite company to like avoid something, at like versus like what we would maybe deeply or metaphysically say about the situation. Like, I've been in certain, I'm sure we've all been in certain conversations before where, like, I can do the big debate dance with you right now, but I just really don't feel like it. And I know it's not really going to lead anywhere. So yeah, you believe what you believe. I believe what I believe.
Yeah.
But I don't really believe that about the issue.
Yeah.
That's a really big difference. So like, just because I'm not going to do the dance in, that particular context doesn't mean I think it's different strokes for different folks about, whether evolution is true. So is that what you were getting at, or something different?
Yeah, no, I was saying the same thing in different ways of just how that kind of seeps in, and you don't actually mention those words. You don't actually leave it and be like, we'll just agree to disagree. It's just like you both recognize it's not really that important. So you're indirectly agreeing to disagree on something. But the topic is like, Snickers, O. Henry,
Right.
What's O. Henry? Oh, see, we disagree.
Exactly.
Because you don't have the confidence to understand O. Henry. So it's like, I guess that's where it's like, if it's humorous, we're okay with it. If it's like, I'm trying to get out of the conversation, or there's a hard black and white, then stick with it.
No, I mean, that's like in switching, obviously I still love philosophical discussion, and that's one of the things like I enjoy on these calls. But like, one of my favorite things about switching from philosophy to what I currently do is that, like, not everything needs to be an immediate source of intellectual combat, right? Like, I'm in the meeting sometimes with people, and they'll bring up a topic about it's rare these days, but like evolution not being true. And you know what? I'm not gonna hammer home on that one in that context right there, but that isn't something I believe different strokes for different folks. Just because practically I'll leave it at that at the moment doesn't mean I believe that in any way, shape, or form.
So that's what I was.
Pick and choose your battles.
That's it. That's what I was kind of mentioning, is that it kind of just exists. It's not spoken, but it does exist lots of times, So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
How important is it for right now? Right? How important is it for right now, for this context of it?
Right.
Yeah.
How many arguments have we had? I mean, to the other thing, you in a consult where it's not important to have that conversation because it's it's just not relevant to what you're trying to accomplish there, versus, us four in our meeting, where we bring up something that has a huge bearing on all four of us. We've had plenty of argument on that, and those are worth having, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And before you finish there, Robbie, I was just thinking that if we get into the coach's lens now, I think this is where I really hit the hammer hard, probably because I'm older, probably because I just hate absurdity, new word, and probably just because I hate mediocrity. I really like, I guess, this idea of not agreeing to disagree with clients when either their competency is low or their willingness is not there to stretch their brain on what could be. And I really am a hard ass for that, where it's like, they're like, yeah, but James, they think this. It's like, so what is happening there? You are having a disagreement with them on something, and you can't leave the room agreeing to disagree, which is basically this. It's not always this, but it's like, well, the client thinks they're going to get all their woes taken care of with a 12-week program and this high intensity thing 3 times a week with a low carb diet, right? and you're allowing them to leave. And I am teaching coaches to be like, no, 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 you don't agree to disagree there on the concept of intentions. What I hit hard on is like, sure, you can still allow them to go out and do that. That's all good. Not without mentioning, hey, I completely disagree with your intentions and what you think you're getting out of this. Now, you don't say it in those words. So I just want to make note, that's what I heard in there, that I try to, Robbie, you just, made me think about that. I'm constantly hitting that hard. No, we're not going to agree to disagree on this. I want us to struggle with this, right? And have a disagreement on where we should go and what we should do and how we go about doing it, right? And then I want us to get to a point of understanding why we're doing it, why would be, et cetera, the journey you go on with clients to get them to that freedom,
Yeah. And I mean, I think Brandon and I would, probably both agree, and, correct me if I'm wrong, B, but, when we're in a consult with someone, we definitely will, like, I have no qualms about saying, like, I believe this, here are the reasons for this, like, I'll back it up, and saying, hey, those are not the right intentions. Of course, it doesn't always happen that people end up agreeing to that. And then it's like, well, go try your method and see how it works out for you.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying ontologically, well, what you believe is just on equal footing with, or I should say epistemologically, it's not on equal footing with what I'm saying. But if you're just, not open to that, then yeah, go try what you want to try. See how it works out for you.
Yeah.
Go be vegan and go try to gain 20 pounds of muscle.
Yeah. Or how is that working out for you?
Yeah. How's that working out for you? Let me know how it goes.
It's like, how is that working? And all of this, both your comment, we should say, just so we all don't think that we're just sitting on an ivory tower somewhere making these comments without actually implementing some care and empathy to clients. Hey, coaches, just telling everyone, we don't actually say those words, right? We do have empathy and care in our language, but that's basically what we're saying back to people. It's not just the way you heard it come out of our mouth. Like, well, yeah, tough guy, how's it been working out for you? That's not how we say it back, right? We language in a way that actually makes people think, come to think of it, yeah, that me switching a diet every 2 months, I guess it hasn't been consistent, right? And we don't say anything. We just let them fall into the chair and fall into an understanding. It couldn't go without saying, just in case people think that we're just throwing these absurd platitudes out.
And being okay with losing clients and money to stand there and say, I'm not going to agree to disagree. I disagree with the things that you want to do, and you can do it, and I'll be here when this doesn't turn out that well. But if this is such a strong thing for you to do X, Y, or Z, either we don't need to work with each other, or we can, and we can see how it goes. But here's how I think it's going to play out.
Yeah. And it's going to cost you 3 times as much.
Yeah.
Because you disagree, right? You'll see 3 charges at the end of your month.
A disagreement charge.
Disagreement surcharge.
Yeah.
Oh, behavioral economics just kind of floated around the intentions there.
Yeah.
All right. So the 2 last things here before we launch into things are
OPEC North Korea.
OPEC North Korea. No disagreement there. Just unity. You remember the I think most people remember this, or I've seen it, the Apple 1984 Big Brother commercial.
Yeah.
Just all humming along, and then the lady with the hammer, and beautiful agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 last things here. So 1, options for dealing with disagreement. And just like I always tried to emphasize, when I was teaching philosophy, there is no such thing as a position that is all benefits and no drawbacks. Doesn't exist. Married, don't get married. Kids, no kids. Travel, don't travel. You name it, But there are positions with better or more benefits and fewer drawbacks, and that work for a certain context. So option 1, different strokes for different folks. The pros of this: less conflict, epistemological humility, saying, well, I just don't know enough. The cons here is it seems to allow irrationality and dangerous positions to flourish. Objective truth takes a back seat. And again, we are getting a master class in that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Option 2 is that there's a fact of the matter and people don't recognize that are just wrong. Like, it's just, I don't care if there are a billion people who think evolution is wrong, or 10, it can be whatever number you want. That doesn't change the fact that there's an objective truth of the matter. So
Yeah,
here,
sorry to go on, but another one I want just people in health fitness think about is ask the question on this planet 2021, how many people, if we had a definition for it, are truly metabolically flexible? Just think about that one, right? Just because 95% of every human probably doesn't have the strength of what we would determine as an objective measure of being metabolically flexible, doesn't mean that your whole notions of, well, this is how people operate, this is how we do things, to your point of like the majority may have everything like this, and you're like, oh, well, that's the truth. It's like, no, no, it's not. It's not whatsoever, right? So I just want to seat that in so people can think about what would be the whole different consequences if 95% of every human on this planet was metabolically flexible, super resilient, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry to pull us off on a tangent, but
no, you're fine. I mean, it's a good example. And I mean, it's a good example of how like beliefs and culture are not going to change those facts. There are facts about how well one utilizes glucose, or fat, I mean, like it's not a matter of culture. It doesn't change according to your beliefs. Like there are just objective matters, a fact at a cellular level about how well you do this or do not. And whether people recognize that or know that, like those were truths before we even had biology or chemistry. It's just that we have become more aware of those truths at this point. So,
oof.
But if I put the study out that shows from a different perspective, then,
yeah, or 11 out of 14 that shows that, or there's, current institutions that have 4-year degrees in the opposite, ideas of what you may think. So, I mean, it's, anyways, well, let's not get drowned in the, anyways.
So here with this view, like objective truth would take a front seat, and we can call irrational and dangerous positions what they are. But the cons, we get more conflict and sometimes a tendency towards dogmatism. Not always, but the con that can potentially come along with, well, this is the way, the light and the truth, or this is the way we go about things. And we've talked about this with regard to fitness too, in kind of the legal realm, right? So one of the reasons why like medicine and law don't innovate that much is, well, they've got these, bureaucracies and structures, but that's also what makes them professional, right? That's what,
for sure. Yeah. In the end, they got a lot of shit to fix and take care of. So when that system does that over and over, they get really good at fixing shit and taking care of things, but does not make it the righteous path for context outside of what they're just trying to do and take care of.
Right.
Like
exactly.
Medicine being the healthy authority.
Right.
No, you're really good at fixing shit.
Yes.
Yeah, you are not the best actually at determining an ideal for a maximal human life.
It's the best at keeping people not sick and not dead when they are in acute situations.
Yes.
That's what it's the best at.
And professional.
Yes.
So professional they are doctors.
Right, exactly. So the last thing to say here that I think will be relevant to our coach discussion is this notion of disagreement, quality versus quantity, right? I think last episode I used the religion example. The Christians today on this planet are the minority, even though they are a large proportion, relatively speaking, to other religions. If we look throughout human history, of course, monotheism is a relatively short-lived thing, relative to the extent of, humanity existing. Does that quantity, fact have any bearing on the truth of, certain religious practices? And then the other question about quality, right? Does it depend on the quality of those who disagree with us? Again, you could have the entire population of the earth saying evolution is not true, but that doesn't make one single solitary difference to the fact that, evolution is true. And I would rather have 10 evolutionary biologists who think evolution is true rather than, 10 million people saying, well, I don't think, you are uneducated thinking it's not. So that's a relevant consideration.
Yeah.
So with that all being said, let's launch into kind of the practical considerations here with regards to coaching and how we go about disagreeing with each other. Maybe I have the first one listed as like, do we have an obligation to disagree and call out bad ideas? We can, I do want to discuss that one, but I feel like the first more general one that is worth asking and discussing is, if we disagree with someone in the fitness realm, what's the most appropriate way to go about that? Is it just an in-person conversation? Can it be an email thread? Should it ever take place over social media? Like, what are your guys' thoughts there as far as how that should?
My first thought is that whoever you disagree with, although this is metaphorical as the concept, but you have to get together with that person, and the public needs to be there live time, seeing you guys try to figure things out.
Yeah.
The public, not other coaches. You don't just talk in a room with other, you like, oh, that was a good one. That was a good one. You got him. No, the public needs to go, like, how is this relevant to me? How, we are going back and forth on, and it needs to be live time in person. So everyone in the audience, like, that's an interesting point, right? I got that. I got a question, right? I got a question. Ooh, I don't have an answer to that. And then this is, well, I do have an answer to that, right? And this, and now at the end of it, it's always this, it's the eggs conversation. Two people get together, scientist and then the artist, right? And we're talking about eggs with regards to health. And then you have 1,500 people who are just humans focused on the vital model. Sit and listen. That's the metaphorical way I think that you're going to come to a way of getting to an answer on, just for those 1,500 people, what is a finishing, what do we leave this conversation with? And everyone goes, the quality of the egg matters. How often you have them matters. What your background is. Like, they come to an answer on, what this disagreement was about. Good or bad? Wrong question. Wrong question. This is how it goes back down to being important for you. Now, in the end, that might be a disagreement on the original notion, like intelligence squared concept, right? The original notion of like, is pulling out of Afghanistan good? Well, we will come to like an agreement as to who scores 60%, 40% on that at the end of this. But maybe at the end, the whole overarching goal is to get to an agreement on how these 1,500 people figure out what eggs are and how they mix in their life,
How does that change when the 1,500 people that are there for the public are all your followers, right? And they're all behind screen names. No one, I think that anonymity is a really important part of, because Robbie and I have seen that a lot, where someone just made the profile and there's no profile pic and I'm anonymous, and there's something there. I mean, their argument may still hold some water and be valid, but there's something there that they don't want to, I don't want to put Brandon Wilton right
I should
there.
have preempted. I apologize. I should have preempted by saying this is an open category. So it's an open public conversation, and we could, I guess, Brandon, you would know better than both Robbie and I would assume, like, how to like language and market that to get the most open concept thinkers come to 1,500, you know what I'm saying? But so I guess to keep going on with that storyline, because it would be literally this way. It would be you and them agreeing, right? The artist and scientist and the concept of the eggs, just like, let's hold hands and let's just go somewhere and end up where 1,500 people are just sitting, right? And you're just like, hey, we're going to talk about eggs, good or bad. And everyone's like, okay, and at the end, that's how it occurs, right?
Followers dropping rapidly.
I know you are raising some good modern points, right? Like, this is the whole thing. So I don't know. I answered your question, Robbie. Any retorts on like, how do we get as close as possible to my definition of how we would get to a point of, or
so many. I mean, one was, I wanted to ask, like, you intend your conception, you intend to be the ideal, not the only way to engage in disagreement, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do think having attended many philosophy colloquia in my day that were, some more highly attended by the public than others, usually more just by philosophy students and professors, practical considerations, like Brandon said, like, do we Do we jump on the digital train so more people can hear us? Do we jump on the time asynchronous train like we're doing right now? We're not going to have 1,500 people attend this conversation right now, but some people want to listen to it in their truck, and yeah, we lose the live time feedback of that. But even in, I'm sure we can all reference debates that we've been to and stuff like that. You can't ask live time questions as they're discussing, right? Like it's usually after. So like all these things are like a series of, I think it's really interesting thinking through the trade-offs of like, it would be ideal to have the public there with you listening, being able to ask questions. But then another question that raises is, does it always have to be topics that the public can understand, right? Like what about more advanced topics in fitness or more advanced topics in nutrition? What's the form for disagreeing about that? So I do think there's a lot that is ideal in that conception, but I wonder about like, can we make trade-offs, in terms of, again, a podcast where like, yeah, we get this asynchronous, us talking, them listening, and maybe they could submit questions. So we lose out on the live time aspect, but we're still disseminating the information in a much greater way than we could if we were saying, South Bend, Indiana at 2 p.m., do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, just thinking through like the logistics of that are kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with the trade-offs example. It's a great one. Thomas Sowell comes to mind in terms of that for a base support principle thinking for that. So I appreciate that notion again. But I was just trying to, I could have simply answered with the reduced aspect as like, well, just say something and just let it go where it may. That's the current option, in my opinion, for a lot of people. It's just, and that's what I hold, that's my biases, I guess, where it's like, I know how tiring it is to try to find the right situation, the right environment, the right game, the right, conversation. It's just exhausting. It aged me like very quickly over a period of 6, 7, 8 years in different ways to try to all get to everyone in that room to have conversations that are really difficult to come to an agreement, right? So what do you end up doing? I end up sitting on my fucking couch, talking on my phone, and just putting it out there and being like, you know what? You can fucking do whatever you want with that principle or idea, right? But the notion coming in is I start every conversation with, I completely disagree with this notion. Snatch and clean and jerk to live long and prosper. And I'm going to think this is my ideas. You can fucking do whatever you want with it. So on that, is that really effective? I don't think it is, right? I don't think it is. So that's where I could have went to answer your question on, well, just, make sure you're convicted in your agreement in your head and then just spit it out. And then that's where it is. Or the other end would be try to create some control around, to your point, it's like egg 2.0, egg 3.0, egg 4.0, and get it, the right environment, the right 2 lines of thinking. And then hopefully everyone leaves with this autonomous concept of like what we do about eggs in my life, right? And they got to that because there was a quote unquote disagreement about the egg, right?
If I called out every bad idea that I hear or see on the internet or even in person, I don't think I'd get anything done. So like what ideas, how do you pick and choose your battles there? What's your value proposition of what you have to gain and lose, for disagreeing with people?
Yeah, it's that goes back to my initial question and asking Robbie if we're going to go that direction, but that's where politics come in. How are you viewed in your environment? What is the optics around what you're looking to do? What's your competence level? What are your cognitive repertoires? How old are you? What's your experience? What job are we talking about here? How important is it? The timing aspect that we discussed. All those things go into, the criticizing bad ideas concept. Where do you sit in it? How does it benefit you? So I don't have a quick answer on that one, but I think if the principle would be, it depends upon who you are, depends upon who you are and where you are and where you are in your journey for coaching and what you would like to do. And we could get into more, I guess, emotional aspects of it, right? Does that concept of criticizing bad ideas fulfill you? And does it lead to a greater good, greater good of like more critical thinking and et cetera? Or are you doing it because it's dramatic and sensational and it makes you feel good just to like put your middle finger up and not do anything about it, right? Because it's very capable that anyone can do that today, right? You could just go on your phone and throw something down and have an anonymous account or et cetera, right? But who am I to say that that's not fulfilling? That could be very fulfilling for people because it's just dramatic and pleasurable, So I guess it largely depends upon where you are, where you're coming from. And let's not forget, where does the disagreement in different aspects of fitness actually fit in the higher order sequence of the deep meaning of stuff, right? I don't want to discount that. I don't want to keep coming back to it, but I want to discount it, right? Let's be super honest, right? Is the polyunsaturated fat and conversions like super important? You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, I guess it depends upon who you are. Are you a scientist that has, 20-year degree, 20 years of research in this? Or are you just someone peddling, the science that you cherry picked on how it's going to lead to inflammation and kill people in 10 years? It's like, well, sorry to go off on that one, but.
I just got caught on people being happy being an anonymous troll. Reminds me of John Gabriel's greater internet dickwad theory. You take a normal person and give them anonymity in an audience equals total dickwad, right?
Yeah, the anonymity just increases the, definitely.
Power.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess to go back to that point, I mean, when I think about, certain examples of disagreements in fitness that obviously I think were kind of central to the movement that you started, James. I mean, there's obviously, there's the never ending ones like high bar versus low bar back squat and all these different, like, we can have discussions around it, but things that actually make a difference and are perhaps worth disagreeing about, like, intensity versus volume. I forget when it was. I think it was earlier this year, but like, you sending that thing to Chris Spieler about, intensity is not the most important variable. It's volume. And I think, when we, Brandon, to your question of like, when do we start to disagree about these things? One potential principle that could be used is the notion of like harm, right? So when we talk about, not snatching and clean and jerking for longevity and not focusing on intensity for health and longevity, and maybe focusing more on the individual model as opposed to the group model for health and longevity. Like when we're talking about like harm that may become someone as a result of doing, tons of muscle ups or handstand push-ups or incorrect kipping pull-ups or what have you, there's somewhat of a principle there of, I can't call out every single bad idea I see, but what about the ones where like, this is probably going to cause pretty decent long-term harm to someone if they are messing around with that. And that may be worth kind of standing up against, perhaps.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Harm to the largest audience as well, too. I mean, Chris Spieler doesn't have a small audience. If it were somebody with 2 followers that was putting out the same message, is it as worthy to put that argument out as it were to save possibly the 15, I don't know how many followers he has, but to save or to put that thought in their heads?
Yeah. Yeah.
I would put it to, I think I was talking to you, Robbie, and I was like, well, that you don't see people in UFC fighting outside of their ranks. Like you don't see, any UFC fighter fighting a YouTube star, but that's wrong now, I guess. So,
But even when it happens, they're officially sanctioned rules, right? There's still rules of engagement of like Jake Paul, they are in a boxing match. They're not in an MMA match.
Yeah.
And the guy can't take him down or knee him, so I mean, going back to this notion of like, when we disagree with people, there have to be certain, I don't know, rules of engagement or standards about which we agree, that is important there. I guess related to that point, do you guys have any thoughts one way or the other on like, does how we disagree with one another depend on who is disagreeing with whom? So, obviously, James, give me a different term besides fitness influencer, because I know you're going to hate it if I call you a fitness influencer, but like fitness luminary, like Chris Spieler, James, I mean, like coach of coaches, does it matter if it's that type thing? Is it, Brandon and I having discussion, that's one level of coach talking to another coach versus client to client. Like, let's say in all of those situations, we minimize the variables and say, we're debating about the exact same thing, whether it's seed oils or should you be doing kipping pull-ups or what have you. Do you think the person who you're debating with has a role to play in how the disagreement goes about?
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking about, as you were asking, I think it still heavily lies on everyone coming to an agreement around where this topic of disagreement fits into the overall hierarchy of things, like what really matters. And everyone agreeing before they even come into that room, regardless of the luminaries, right? Like, you know, does this really matter? And that's where I'm kind of getting stuck of like, even thinking about getting into the room with someone else on the other side, without like immediately going to like, are we really discussing like group versus individual? Like I can't even enter into that. So to answer your question, yes, it does matter, because I do believe that there has to be, you know, experience. The person also, which I, you know, unfortunately unfold all the time. I've fucked a lot of people up, you know, trying things and practicing. So it's not like I've only seen it one way. I've like really tried another way as an example to some humans joints not really working out. So I think, yeah, the background, the experience, and there could be other things, Robbie, but that has a big part to play to, you know, who comes into the room. But everyone in the room, it also has to be aware of what the intentions are, right? And this is where it comes into the influencer versus coercion, right? Like my overarching, I would hope anyways, energy coming into the room for any form of disagreement with someone else would be for those people to leave with better thoughts, right? Better ways to strategize on thinking about how to go about this whole thing, right? It's not to set them up to purchase my shit, or it's not to set them up to get them into my gyms or to buy my template, right? So that has to be cleared, which I love when people step up, example, in argument, and they say, listen, this is my bias, right? I believe in evolution, and I believe that this is not necessary in today's society. And then they get into it. They're at least saying, this is my intentions. You need to know what my intentions are. My intentions are for all of us to come to an agreement on the end of like, what is strategies for good thinking? What is strategies to get you out of trouble? You know, what does maximal human potential and the 15,000 workout actually mean? You know, like I want people leaving with those ideas that they can't turn their back on. They can't say that they didn't learn. And then it kind of, as you can see, it kind of squashes everything inside of the intentions of the other person, which could be good intentions, right? They could have positive intentions of really thinking, I'm going to make people healthier, anti-sugar, you know, anti-lobbying of sugar. You know, this is where it wins. It's just movements, virtuosity, blah, 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 blah. You know, they just say all these things, but they really think their intentions are the same as mine. Do you see that? So that's where, you know, coming into the room, I would just say that you got to have clear intentions, and let's not forget that. Let's really recognize before we talk, does this really matter? Does it really matter in the hierarchy of things? Okay, it's like middle hanging fruit. Okay, cool. I do agree with you on that. Now let's get to it.
Yeah, good luck on having people expose their true intentions prior to the discussion as well too. Like,
but I think that's a lack of competency, not malevolence.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people just whatever, they do have good intentions, and we know this to be true from how they live their lives and other things that go on in their actions, right? But we're like, I can't believe, dude, you actually think that, right? You say this to yourself while you sit down, right? And then you meet with them and talk it out, right? For hours and hours, like I've done with you, for example, right? And it's like, and at the end, you're like, fuck yeah, fuck. You know, but what did it take? It took talking it out, right? Like, yeah, so you saw that person leave, and then you noticed this and you noticed this, right? It's like, yeah, gosh. And now you got to go back to your language, and you got to go back to like how you're thinking about your language, right? And then you just see that you had good intentions, but the way you went about trying to express it to other people or communicate it was from doctrine, really, from doctrine that you just wanted to jump on. I apologize for using you specifically on that. I just meant that.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just imagining the influencer who's selling the butt program, just being like, I thought this butt program was going to change everyone's life, just having a moment, a breakdown, changing all of their butt related products.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Robbie, because this is it, right? And this is my point. I don't even want to get into a room. I don't want to get into the room and even discuss that. Because listen, before I even get into the room, I'm like, first of all, where does hip extensions off a bench with a heavy load really matter in our life right now? That's how I come into it. I'm like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? And then I get inside and I can't communicate. So it's my issue. I can't communicate to connect to people's brains. This movement you're doing is the stupidest movement for function forever. How other way do I tell you? Like, I don't know how to rewind this around. Oh, you want me to cherry pick, scientific evidence? Sure, I'll do that, right? I'll pull that one out, right? I'll make you try to realize what good patterns are, and picking shit up off the ground is more primal than lying on your back and trying to
pick up stuff off the ground with your
200
butt.
pounds. I'm just trying to come up with a humorous method of like lying in bed, humping your hips up and down as being functional. I don't know what you guys can take that and roll with it, whatever way you want. Yeah, it's a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I mean, I've got the perfect social media tagline for this one. James doesn't want to talk about butt stuff. Hey, butt stuff is the name of a program, by the way. Don't get your mind out of the gutter. Like that actually is the name of a fitness program.
Oh, dude, I know. I seep in there. I seep into the madness. I see what's going on. Nothing has changed.
Dips his toes every now and then.
Yeah, there's gas on top of it, in my opinion.
So is fitness and philosophy now the governing body for fitness and health related combat? Are people drinking in a bar or while people meet in an octagon, watching beautifully structured philosophical combat about fitness and health now?
Yeah,
I'm high-fiving.
I mean, we think that.
I'm going to be the Herb Dean of UFC referee. I'm going to be the Herb Dean of.
You could be the Dana White.
Yeah.
Well, you do open up an interesting point on, maybe the future does hold, if it's philosophy or if it's in a disagreement, a subset, and I'm laughing as I even come up with this notion because it's not going to happen. Set it up where it's not like a hoodwink, it's not a hoodwink mechanism. Brandon, you see that one's coming back into play again. Where I get to disagree with someone else on their perspective of a particular topic, eggs, intensity and fitness, etc. But as I'm saying that, no one's gonna set up that.
Yeah.
No one's up for that. No one is, and for good reasons, right? They got a lot of things to take care of. They got to put food on their kids' table, so their world could get crumbled by 5 minutes of my back and forth with them, and even if I don't per se win in it, it just may not work for them. So, anyways.
B, did you have any thoughts one way or the other on kind of who the interlocutors are? Like, does that coach versus coach or fitness luminary? Did you have any thoughts one way or the other on whether that makes a difference?
I think it depends. I agree with James on the intention, like a client's intentions and a coach's intentions and a fitness influencer's intentions. I think as long as we understand the rules and we understand the intentions of the person coming in and what the actual discussion is even about, I think you get these broad discussions around things. But I mean, I think it's all fair game, right? But understanding picking your battles as well too. If I DM a fitness influencer with 10 million followers, I'm not going to get anywhere, but I don't think it should stop you from picking that battle though.
Yeah, but I mean, it just goes into the netherland, right? It doesn't even, you don't get anything from it. And to your point, like I have 20,000 followers on Instagram, and there's other people who do, I would call it nefarious things in fitness that are intention, that have 3 million things. So my voice doesn't matter depending upon the context of how you look at it, right? Like, so I take the coach's lens. I'm answering Brandon's question here, Robbie, although you asked him for it, for the coach lens. Taking the coach lens, it's like, it really does come down to, what are your capabilities as a coach? Like, you know, do you know how to figure out things, right? Do you know how to figure out what is true? You know, have you ever had experiences in your life where you had to learn something and figure it out and go searching down these multiple different roads? You know, and if you haven't had numerous experiences in that in your life, there's no way you're going to have success in trying to come up with a resolution to this disagreement between high bar and low bar. You won't even have the skills to navigate that thing. You know what you're going to do? You're going to take a weekend course, right? And then for 7 weeks later, it's like, oh, you know, bar up here, and this is the position, and this is the reason why. You're drawing shit on the board, right? And weightlifting with everyone. And then you're going to take another course, and you're like, oh, and then you got to switch it up. And now, the bar is lower now, a little while. And the whole time, you couldn't even recognize, you didn't have the skills to like figure out what the truth is to give to your people, right? You know, and you could have done this. And this is where people argue all the time. It's like, no, you know, this doesn't happen all the case. But fuck, it does, right? But this is what you do. You come out of the high bar, and this is the opposite person, right? The utopic model, where the person has learned how to like disagree and debate and come up with these things that are truth and fitness. And they go into the high bar and they ask some tough questions, right? And they recognize, okay, they have different intentions. They want to teach this because it's most effective for weightlifting. This is good for these, you know, front rack positions of flexibility. Yeah, all the things. They're like, okay, good. But they leave the weekend with like, now, how do I apply this, right? How do I apply this? And this is where you go first. What the fuck are we doing squatting with load? That's the first thing you come back to. You sit on your couch and go, why? Okay, some people get that. Okay, now next, where do I do it? You know, people don't have a shoulder. You know, it's like, then you start individualizing it based on what you just learned for your people. So that's how I came up with like an answer to the high bar, low bar. It was answered with, it depends. It depends on what you're doing, why you squat with load, who this is for, what the fucking reason is for it. What is this piece of metal with all these things on the outside? Like, that's how you answer it. So I think the coach's intellect, fitness intelligence, emotional intelligence, experience, and their ability to decipher, right, between these differing opinions, but then sit back and contemplate and think about it and be like, well, principally, how does that work, right? What are the principles of that whole thing? So you don't just jump into piling on in different areas and end up being, you know, just following three people who are just saying this reductionist version of these answers, right? For what fitness is. And that can be super threatening to people, right? Would you guys agree? Like, I mean, to say, oh, no, you need to have an open mind, and it depends in a lot of situations. Like, but I need to have an answer. Like, I won't have clients and I'll be missing out on all these new things if I don't have an answer. It's like, no, actually, you just don't have the skills in the communication to clients based upon that, right? They could still have trust in you, right? But you're coming at it authentically, you know, with answering it like this. Not real sure, but this is what I think is best principle of how we do this, right? You don't have a lot of experience in squatting. So doesn't it make sense that we just learn the movement really well? And then they're like, yeah, I guess. Do you see that? But they wanted to agree to disagree on, let's just say high bar is the best and get over with it. Right? It's like, well, no, I'm not doing that. I've dropped back to principles, and I actually didn't know the answer if high bar or low bar was going to be better for you, but we landed on this agreement of principle, right?
So high bar or low bar, James?
Conversation for another time.
Yeah.
And we could, yeah, it's just because it's apropos for what we discussed yesterday for the gyms call. We actually had that conversation, not particularly, but where does loaded squatting fit? And this is not to take us off on a different angle, but we had lots of disagreement on what is the truest generalized maximal expression of the squat pattern. And I just, you know, argued for 45 minutes straight, and then we all talked, but about the evolutionary and growth and developmental process of the squat being done for purposes of gathering things at a lower center of mass and staying in that position. And nowhere in our like repertoire of skills we've gained for our lifetime did it ever make sense to pick a fucking heavy rock off the top of something and hold on to it, lower it under tempo with a packed spine, stand up. Like, you know, philosophically, that makes no sense. So see, my point is like high bar, low bar. Well, there actually is a huge agreement and disagreement inside of that. And so maybe another time. And it's almost kind of considering what I mentioned earlier is that my hope is with this FIP over time, Robby won't allow me to just end up just in a corner talking to myself or writing shit on my window.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be like John Nash from A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah,
that's what I'm hoping you're gonna. That's why I'm still here. It's kind of like my own rehab is just to be here. So you're like, no, James, don't walk away from the argument. Don't just get in your corner and believe that those are the truths. I think you need to stay with it and philosophize on this a little longer.
I'm just imagining all whiteboard walls, ceilings, and everything says 12 autonomy, like all these numbers and
mind maps of words, bigger words, smaller words, you know.
Yeah, sustainability,
intensity, volume.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that you were hinting at, James, that kind of gets us into our next question is, you know, what are the ways in which in disagreement and fitness can be either beneficial or detrimental? I think one thing that you highlighted that may be relevant here is, and correct me if this is wrong, but, you know, maybe we could say something like, a lot of times fitness is very mired in these more minor, you know, high bar versus low bar, Olympic lifting versus powerlifting, you know, I don't know. There are a bajillion that we could all just list out.
Yeah.
But without doing much thought about like the philosophy behind them or the deeper foundations of like the framework, right? Like, so, you know, just like you were saying with like, well, high bar or low bar, but like, why is one even squatting in the first place? And how did it come to be that we have a loaded bar on our back? And how did we engage in these practices? So, you know, based on what we're talking about now and what you're saying, I think I personally think, and I suspect you guys would agree, one of the ways in which disagreement can be beneficial in fitness isn't necessarily at the level of high bar, low bar, although maybe there are interesting conversations to have there, but it can be at the level of like frameworks in fitness and different foundational assumptions or principles of how we even go about fitness, because a lot of those haven't been exposed and or questioned until more recently. Like, why do we even do this in the first place? And if we do, what's the best way to go about it? So I think that's a way in which disagreement in fitness can be beneficial.
Yeah, of course, I agree with that notion, but I would also say on the back end of it that I just, in my 25 years, I don't see with the way people communicate and the mediums of communication today, I don't see that concept getting better. I don't see it getting broader and longer and et cetera. I see just it reducing down to the 30-second bits of pleasure and answers. That's the answer. I don't see it going the opposite direction for things that we hold to be really, you know, interesting and challenging, you know, concepts. That's why I always keep pessimistically thinking it's going to end up in a Gattaca approach where people who are willing to like discover responsibility around physical navigation and autonomy and stuff, and who ... unfortunately came back to our points before of like accessibility and economy and money, and they have access to that. That's the only people that will just be talking amongst one another of challenging topics on high bar and low bar. Why? Because it's the only opportunity for space to have that discussion, where I just don't see it happening, you know, outside of maybe our just little areas, you know, but I'm talking general for the whole, for big movements and impact, you know, for that.
I mean,
but we do our part, right? We're doing our part, I think.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I feel like, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, the sense I get, you know, OPEX, let's just take an example. OPEX has increased the number of coaches that are, you know, applying and going through the program and opening gyms and things of that nature. And I mean, that isn't indicative of everything, of course, but I mean, there is some movement towards that. Would you agree? Like that or no?
No. It just depends upon defining success, right? I mean, we have a continual increasing number of people who've gone through CCP, right? But that can't be the definition of success. We also are not, under scale, improving our gym numbers every month, there in, there out for the next, 8 years. It's not. It's actually like staying level or actually going down. So, I'm not saying there's no positivity in like having more minds out there who might do, but I don't have any control over what those people who finish CCP and do with any of those principles, right? I don't have any, not that I want to have control, but I don't have any control over what they do with that. So we're making assumptions to think that they're actually making an impact or implementing those principles or having the hard conversations. So if our system is not a sign of like ultimate success in like the golden light of moving towards that, then I can tell you there's numerous others that are also, let's call it little underground groups that are having the same struggles. It's because it's overwhelming, right? It's a snowball effect of the overwhelming perspective from the client. We got to take the client's perspective. That's it. It's like, it's so fucking confusing. Right? So fucking confusing. And it's confusing to a number of people who are also in a majority, have a really hard time, critically thinking. That's a huge statement, but I just do believe it. I believe 8 out of 10 of most humans you're going to get come in front of you are not well-versed in really challenging arguments. And if you have 8 out of 10, everyone shows up in front of you who are not willing to be like, hey, you know what? I think you doing that stupid classes for, you don't say it this way, a stupid class for the past 3 years is going to lead to your lack of health. You see that? Like, I mean, they're like, oh, you're a fucking asshole. I'm going down the street. They're not willing to go, oh, interesting. I never thought of it that way. Could you explain more on your notions, right? What you mean by that? So I just believe that's what we have now is the 2 out of 10 that will just land in front of us that are just willing to kind of struggle with those things. Or unfortunately, to continue that story, a lot of people get to the end of their rope, right? They get beat up or hurt or et cetera. And now they need the OPEX concept for a remodeling or rehab. So.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to find a willing partner to have discussions, like an actual discussion. Yeah, and like you said, the OPEX movement is definitely in opposition of what is the nature of the amount of people out there on social media and what's going out. It's like it's not as flashy. I mean, there's only so much you can make broccoli sexy.
Yeah, just be honest with it. That's what I like. Just be honest, right? I gave you my example. I could give you, so I have 20,000 followers. So OPEX has 60,000 followers, right? So maybe our YouTube videos get, I don't know, 80,000, 8,000 views or whatever, right? There's individuals that more humans follow that get 1 million views every 5 days, right? And what are they promoting, right? They're promoting something that works well for the attention to the audience that they're getting, right? So you can see that it's not on poor intentions from OPEX, right? I mean, but you got to say, well, what is the medium? How do people communicate? What are their thoughts on this? And I think it's just really hard to do the right thing today in fitness. And if it's really hard, most people will not choose it. And they don't want to listen to it. And they don't want to follow people who say that. Listen, it's up to you. Pull your pants up, right? Learn how to chew. Yeah, I mean, it's like people don't want to hear that, which should just make sense. Should just make sense to us. But again, it doesn't end us with like falling flat to saying that there's no reason to have disagreements. I think there's, even your point, Robbie, right? You just asked a question, and I disagree with it, right? This is where great agreement and disagreement can occur in fitness. It's like, I think you're wrong, right? Oh, interesting. Well, why don't you explain why you think I'm wrong? And then we'll allow the listeners or anyone else to make an answer or thought on that,
Yeah, well, I guess with that in mind, allow me to disagree because, I mean, I think maybe one of the sources of our disagreement, sometimes both with this point in today, but also in previous episodes, is I don't know that I agree that today, maybe it's a bit worse in terms of like people wanting what's sexy, but like this is like Socrates, you know what I mean? Like the sophists versus philosophers, like it's human nature to gravitate towards what's easy.
Mhm.
Socrates, got the hemlock treatment for telling the truth. I think it's always in every generation, unless human nature changes, going to be a struggle for those who talk about that which is the truth but boring to get the message out there. I don't know that that's a unique feature of today. It's just kind of the nature of what is.
Oh, I'm agreeing that it's always been there, but I think I'm talking about majority minority there. I
Yeah.
think majority today, it's definitely swayed in the in the absurd.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, and I mean, I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Like, I do see, again, these things change, and who knows how it's going to swing in the future, and maybe it goes back in the other direction. But like, CrossFit was really ascendant for a long period of time, and high intensity mixed modal functional fitness, and now it's really, it's still there, it's still in the background, but it's kind of gone down a bit. And at least in our little nook of the world, this notion of going back to basic strength principles and basic aerobic training has gained more prominence. Now, of course, it's not what everyone is doing, but I and maybe it's just the bubble that we're in, but I feel like at least in some ways there are some movements towards those more, I guess, higher order virtuous ways of thinking about fitness and how one should go about it.
Yep. No, I agree with that.
Do you just continue to, to make progress, to make, I guess, more effective progress? Do you just continue to make the non-sexy arguments and just hold that up? Or do you Kurt Russell it in Escape from LA? Do you just shut everything down and now the only option is everyone has conversations, right?
Well, that's what I meant. Like I
Yeah.
was talking about the Kurt Russell by me being in the corner on my window, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm moving closer and closer to that. I'm being honest, right? Like, because I just recognize that this is great, right? This is great, but I just get so many punches to the reality of a lack of definition of what you just mentioned, progression, right? We talk about progression, but I don't see it as progressing. I see it as regression. I see it as a conversation with futility in it. It's like, yeah, let's discuss. Let's discuss what? Nothingness. Oh, well, what the fuck are you doing discussing it? Right? Like, so I back up from it and then just see the odd case, right? Oh, principled conversation. Ooh, challenging disagreement with the current, like, I see that as like, oh, that's kind of cool, right? But then I, of course, just we all deal with things differently, right? And so that I'm just mentioning where I see it. Maybe we're agreeing to disagree on our perceptions of that,
No,
but
I mean, that gets into what we were discussing before. I mean, Brandon and I have obviously been doing this for a certain period of time, and you've, have a decent bit more experience with it. So maybe it's, different levels of experience. Yeah, it could be
maybe,
different perspectives.
maybe I'm just provocative.
Maybe.
It's all folly.
It's all
It's all just sits back in his chair, takes a big breath. None of this matters.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Just get swallowed up
Doing
by the
nothing to
majority.
change it.
Yeah.
I think that's what provocative would be, though, in the definition. I'm just like throwing out tropes and just doing nothing about it, knowing it will just cause a stir and just cause issues. But that's not the case. As you know, I'm in it. I'm in it. Yeah, I wear the shirt. I'm willing to go 100%, but I'm also very clear as to what the expectations are and how to define, what true progression is and what impact is. And I know it's difficult. I know. Yeah, I sometimes think about all the really fascinating things that we know about human potential that we're just leaving on the table. We're not even touching. You know, that's what makes me sad. It makes me disappointed to kind of know that there's all these great, wonderful things that everyone could understand and get behind and make it very simple. And it's just left there. It's left there to just a couple of people to talk about. And it's really sad that we don't get the opportunity for all those people to experience that unbelievable, you know, challenge of human potential and working their way towards it, you know.
A single tear.
Yeah.
As somebody scoots by in his chair from Wally, just sipping on a milkshake. There's James just crying.
One question I wanted to ask you guys that I'm actually interested in quite a bit myself, because I know this definitely exists in philosophy, and it certainly exists in like physics and biology. Do you guys see, or have you encountered any rational disagreements in fitness? And what I mean by that is people who you know, either fitness luminaries or coaches who you respect, you know, are well educated, you know, they are operating in good faith, they're not trying to, you know, come out with the butt stuff program or what have you, where you disagree with them about maybe some bigger issue in fitness, or about how fitness should be gone about. Are there such disagreements in fitness? Have you guys encountered such disagreements? Any thoughts there?
Man, maybe I'm trying to, you know, maybe I'm unfortunately looking at it as a really complex answer, but I think there's, maybe if you asked it a different way, I'd get it. But I think what you're asking is that, are there actually disagreements out there that are somewhat perceived to be rational from my perspective in fitness? So what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, in your case, especially like among like fitness luminaries, among your peers who you respect.
I like that, by the way. I really like that, fitness luminaries. Like it, I don't know, it seems like a levitation, you know, lights behind the person kind of feeling. Anyone else feel that?
Yeah, I like that word too. I'm glad. I literally came up with it on the spot because I thought you were gonna like
That's money.
punch me through the Zoom call for calling you an influencer. So I had to come up with something on the spot.
I'll punch him for you.
But yeah, I mean, in almost every other endeavor I've ever been involved in, and again, philosophy and other things, like there are people who I like, respect, who are educated, who I disagree with on certain things. And I guess, James, what I'm asking both of you guys, but you know, James, in your case, like on the peer group of like, you know, name who you want to name, you know, Eric Cressy and Kelly Starrett, all the rest of these folks. Do you feel like there are any topics about which one can rationally disagree about, either the purpose of fitness or how we should best go about it, or things like that? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. And I do have a hard stop for a couple of minutes ago. So I am going to just mention one, and maybe this could foray into an actual full, you know, subset part 2 of this, that we actually bulk out different actual challenging disagreements that are rational arguments in fitness. Because I could probably think of 3 or 4 of them right away, and I wouldn't name names, but it would be very clear of like a disagreement that's okay, let's get to the table and discuss that. Yeah, the one I think about right away is, ironically, it's the philosophy. It's philosophizing and the lack of it, and where it should fit into the fitness zeitgeist. I strongly like have, I don't know how many, you know, indirect naysayers of that concept, right? That we don't even see that it actually is an argument or a disagreement, but there's a lot of people that disagree with that. The notion of asking harder questions around the intentions of why we're doing any of this, right? So I think that's one. And is it rational? Yeah, it is on their behalf. It is, because they come with really, you know, good points of disagreement on it. Yeah, and I respect those disagreements. I also, on the other side of it, of course, have tremendous, you know, debate answers to that disagreement, right? It's obvious, and we're super biased on that because we want to ask those hard questions, but that would be one. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe that'll just tease it out for us to go into a part 2, if you guys are up for that on this particular topic.
Yeah.
That doesn't screw up the method, Robbie.
No,
Okay.
I like that. So yeah, let's I like that as a little teaser. Let's leave it there for today.
Okay,
And we'll
super.
come back and we'll do some more disagreeing.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks to you both. I hope you enjoy your weekends. Brandon, yeah, you could stay on. I think he could stay on. Right, that was pretty good.
You have to,
We
you
score
have
him
to give
okay,
it to
Robbie?
me in a,
Yeah, that was.
and then turn it down. Turn it down.
Yeah, yeah. Hey.
Yeah. Oh man.
That was awesome. Well done.
Yeah.
Okay. Take care.
All right.
All right, talk to you guys later.